In this lesson, we're going to take a look at color theory. In particular, we're going to start off by looking at the color wheel and looking up the colors that make up the color wheels, going over the basics of that. Then once we've got that, we're going to take a look real quick at hue, saturation, and value and what these are and why we need to know them. Next, we're going to go through the different color harmonies, and then I'm going to finish up by showing you a poor example of using color in design. So to start, let's look at the color wheel. You've probably seen this before. It's made up of 3 different types of colors. The first one is primary colors. This is your blue, red, and yellow. Next up is the purple, orange, and green, or your secondary colors. These are made mixing the respective primary colors. So we have red mixed with blue gives us purple, and so on. Next, if you mix that even further, you get what is called tertiary colors, and this makes up the completed color wheel that you're probably used to seeing. So now that we know what the color wheel is, we're then going to take this color wheel and create a bunch of color schemes using color harmony that we've learned over the years in design and other fields like art. But first, before we do that, I want to take a look at 3 things that you need to be aware of to make better color schemes. And these 3 things are hue, saturation, and value. So hue is basically the selection of the color, so what color you're using. Once you have that selected, you can then adjust the saturation and the value. You'll see that we are adjusting the red color throughout this. So we've selected the red for our hue, and saturation is simply the intensity, whether it's subtle or vibrant. So here we have a very vibrant, and this would be subtle. So a high saturation means the color looks bright, and a low saturation means the color looks washed out or kind of grayish, as you can see by this kind of pinkish gray color down here. Next up is value, and this is how dark or light you want the color to be. So we're adding white here to create this, and we're adding black more into each one of these swatches until we get down to something like this. So those 3 things were going to help you when you're creating your color schemes. So when we select them via color wheel, then we can adjust these 3 things to make them look even better. So now back to the color wheel and color harmony. For most of these that we're going to go over, I would recommend choosing one dominant color. That's just going to help you create a better balance in your color schemes. So first off, here we have the color wheel. If we select the red color and then we take the colors straight across from it on the color wheel, we have green. That would be a complementary color scheme. This is the most basic harmony. It has a high contrast and a vibrant look. But most often you'll find this can be too much contrast if you don't use it properly. The high contrast can be seen in common error and success messages, which is why error is usually red and green is usually success. They are very far apart on the color wheel. They're complementary colors. This color scheme overall is pretty tricky to use. The next one is analogous. This is formed by grabbing one color, so green, and then the 2 colors touching it on the color wheel. So we have a blue-green and then we have a yellow-green. So the analogous is related colors, basically. They're the colors right next to each other on the wheel. They usually match well and they're pleasing to the eye. You'll find these commonly in nature. When you are selecting an analogous color scheme, you want to make sure you're using enough contrast to separate the colors out. And of course, choosing one color to be the dominant would be preferred and the others secondary or highlight colors. Next is a triad, or using 3 colors of equal distance from each other on the wheel. As you can see, each one of these colors has 3 colors in between it on the wheel, making a triangle. You want to use this sparingly. This can be viewed as too vibrant and too colorful. So this is one you want to play with your saturation and value. You wouldn't want to use these 3 colors here in just a straight up design unless you're using them very sparingly. So you have small objects that you're going to use purple on and orange on. So for example, we could choose the purple one and then we could lower or increase the value and saturation of the other 2 colors to make them less clashing with this purple. Next up is the split complementary color scheme. For this, we have a green color selected, and then we go straight across from it on the color wheel to the red, and then we split that for our selection, giving us a triangle. So we go over to the left and grab this purple red, and we go to the right of that red and grab the orange red. So this color scheme has a high contrast as well, but it has less tension, meaning it looks just overall better if you were to throw these 3 colors together. This is a safer choice. It's very difficult to mess up, and it's a good color scheme for beginners to start out with. Now the next 2 I'm going to show you are very similar. They're both using 2 complementary color pairs. For a rectangle, we're grabbing the blue and orange pair and the green and red pair. In this rich scheme, we have many possibilities and variations. You want to pay attention to the balance of the warm and cool colors in this. So our cool colors in this selection would be the blue and the green, and our warm colors would be the red and the orange. You want to make sure these don't contrast each other too much. You want to find a good balance between all four of them. Again, like most of these, you want to choose a dominant. So for most UI designs, I would choose the blue and have the others as secondary options. And lastly, we have the square. This time we're grabbing the red and the green, and then the blue purple and the orange yellow. So in this layout, with selecting those two pairs, we have a square that is formed like this on the color wheel. This scheme, not a lot of people like calling it a color scheme because you're pretty much using every color. You're selecting reds, blues and purples, oranges and yellows, and greens. So this one I use a lot. It's really great for UI UX design because we have a lot of color to play with. In most of our designs, we have selection screens and different groupings of items that we need to separate somehow, and I use color a lot to do that. So this one is a great one to learn. So lastly, I want to check out readability with you guys. Just one thing that a lot of people do when they get into colors, they get excited and they start throwing combinations together. That's great. You need to experiment. But one thing you need to know is there can be too much color. So this one doesn't really have a good color scheme. I guess this could be an example of using a square or rectangle scheme. It's just kind of all together. So one thing you want to know is that not everything has to be colored. You can use blacks and whites and grays to fill up the rest of the content on the screen. So here I'm using blue and red. Let's just pretend like I'm using blue. That's my main color. And then the rest of these are black, blues, and grays. So that's going to help me keep this more focused on what I want instead of this kind of rainbowy mess over here. So that's it for the color theory overview. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next lesson.